Hi, everyone. This is going to discuss Section 8 of the Oracle Database Design Curriculum. Primarily, we're going to be looking at mapping. And what we mean by mapping is we're going to go from this idea of our logical design that we've kind of thought through and put into entity relationship diagrams, and some of the conventions that we would follow and some of the different wording we might use when we go from a conceptual to a physical model here. So, let's take a look at a data set, and I'll go through some of these things here. So this up here might be information about classes. Now, you can see we have a section ID. I'll just go through it here real quick. Class ID and semester. We have an instructor ID and a campus, building, room, start and end time, meeting days, max students, and a fee. Now, if we were looking to, put some terms on here, there's a few things that would certainly be appropriate. So this section ID I would look at, and I would assume that that is going to be our unique identifier for a section. Now, we could accomplish the same thing by saying a composite key made up of the class ID plus semester, but typically we would just assign an artificial made up number and just sequentially add to it as they get added to our system to serve as a unique identifier. Now, when we have a relationship, there's got to be a field that's shared between two tables, as you've seen as you've gone through things like normalization. In this case, the instructor ID would be a good example of a foreign key or something that's going to enable those relationships. We would assume somewhere else there's going to be some sort of instructor table that has an ID, person's name, that maybe their office, email address, phone number, all that sort of stuff, whatever information you would have available to you as students. There are going to be some sort of constraints that go on these fields. For example, something like a section ID, we might say it has to be numeric. This would be what we would call the data type of the field, much like you might declare a variable to be a string or an integer or Boolean when you're, creating a program. Max students, so on. There are some things that might be optional that might not always be obviously optional. For example, campus and building. We might say even that the campus is online for a course that is meeting fully online, but there's no physical building that's going to be associated with that. So you might say building, room, start and end time, those might be things that are going to be considered optional because you don't necessarily have to have them. Versus if we were to go in and add a course that might be remote. So if we were to go in there, where it's remote, maybe that still has a start and end time. But doesn't have necessarily a building and room number. So I'll just keep that number consistent. But effectively, we would also start to look at what sort of constraints do we want on this. So for example, just a couple things that would jump out to me. Max students, these would be what we call column integrity. So the max students can't be negative. Maybe we allow it to be zero at least temporarily when it's being set up in the system. Um, that's certainly something you might want to do. Course fee, again, I would assume that that can't be negative, but I would also assume that that's going to be capped somewhere. Let's say the college, by the way, the R, if you don't see that often, that is usually how we would represent Thursday. So that's TR would be Tuesday and Thursday, because otherwise T is Tuesday and Thursday, and how do you know the difference? But meeting days, let's say we don't have Sunday classes. We would not allow, classes to meet on Sundays. Start and end times, we might define a start time and end time that are not allowed. You can't start a class before 7 a.m., let's say, or 6 a.m., or whatever we do here. You might set those sort of rules just to prevent somebody from, even if it's just to prevent somebody from making a mistake. You could put those sort of constraints in there. Campus, we have Hackensack, we have Lyndhurst, we have Paramus, and then maybe we have the remote and online options. But you wouldn't want somebody to be able to go in there and accidentally type in Patterson instead of Paramus. So, you can put a constraint in there where it must be one of these types of values. Same thing here, semester must be a 4-digit number followed by a slash followed by either fall, spring, summer. You could define rules like that, or just give it a list of legal values. And instructor ID, since we did say a foreign key, this would be related to another table. I couldn't go in here and add an instructor. Right now it's just in Excel, but I wouldn't be able to add an instructor who does not exist. So if I were kind of deciding I would like to turn this into something that is going to be mapped to our database, there's a couple things that we would keep in mind. We would say, first of all, the column name is not going to be, we're not going to have spaces in it. And we traditionally would write this in what we call our snake case, where we have just the little underlines there. And you sort of set that up. Now, if we were really doing this, the other thing is, I know Oracle kind of sticks with this and doesn't go forward. But the other thing that I would start to think about is, should we worry about data types and things like that? Again, even though it's not shown here, I would certainly start to think about this around the same point. So if we were noting this, we would typically do something like this and determine, okay, what's optional, what's required. And we might say, well, we're going to make you optional, and so on. But this would be the time where we start to think about what should this look like once we translate that over. And now our terminology is also going to change a little bit. So for example, if we say like a section we would have referred to as an entity when we're doing our entity relationship diagram. Once this goes into the database, we're going to refer to that instead of as an entity, as a table. So tables will be one of the big words there, but it's basically just another name for section. One section or an instance of this section we would refer to as a row or a record. So again, there's going to be a lot of different names that you might find there. So this would be a row or a record. The column, such as campus here, this would be referred to, it becomes, instead of an attribute of a section, when we start to talk about in databases, it can be referred to as a column, or it can also be referred to as a field. And then something that might be a unique identifier, like a section ID here. In the database, it becomes a primary key. And something that's a unique identifier from another table becomes, so what we might call secondary unique identifier is going to become a foreign key. So these are some of the words that we're going to need to use because when you start to look at structured query language documentation, these are the terms that you start to talk about when we start to write queries. So, but again, if we were really spending a lot of time on the design here, and we are, we're certainly not, I know it seems like it, but it's, only a few weeks of the class. You would probably spend a lot more time with your customers also digging into this, like what are the legal values, what buildings are legal, even things like if that were on a Lyndhurst campus does not have a technology building, so therefore those types of things could be rejected. Course section can't last longer than a certain number of hours. There's a lot of things that we could start to put in here. Now, another thing we might find is you might say, well, where's the description of what this course is? Where's the name? Where's the number of credits? All of that. I would assume somewhere else there is a class table that would have that information in it, just what is INF 217. So in that case, we would expect something like, let me just call this up and we'll take a look. Something that's a little more similar to your, in your student view, where you're able to go in and search for classes. You're able to go in and take a look at your course catalog. And I clicked on something. But if you were to go in here, I sometimes like to take a look at the output to kind of determine what this is going to look like in the future. But yeah, the name of the course, number of credits, a description, the prerequisites for the course. This is information that no matter what we are looking at, regardless if you're taking my section or Professor Ortiz, Professor Verno, anybody else, this is what the course is covering. Again, no matter who's teaching the course, you should be here. You should have completed one of those 4 courses. And then you start to get into the section information where you look at, number of seats. This would probably be somewhere else in a semester table, honestly, because notice both of us had the same start and end dates for the semester. So that's even another table that would be somewhere, along the way there. But again, typically you have some sort of description. So here's systems analysis. You can see that we have the name, number of credits, description, prerequisites, and then individual sections and all the characteristics of those. So hopefully that helps to clear up some of that terminology, and take care.